Hi everyone, I'm Ricardo Gonçalves. Welcome to my living room and welcome to Your Health and Your Wealth. It's episode 6. If you are watching live on my social media, thank you for joining me. If you're on Facebook and LinkedIn, you can leave a comment live and I'll try to get to it. If you're watching anywhere else, thank you very much on delay or listening to this as a Spotify. Thanks for logging on. Well, later last month, a record $15 billion worth of home loans were refinanced to take advantage of these record low home loan interest rates. But are they right for you? We'll tell you more later. But first, to your health. And this week is National Diabetes Week. The condition affects around 1.7 million Australians. And the focus of this year's campaign is on mental health. So for more, I'm joined live from Melbourne by Renza Scibilia from Diabetes Australia. Renza, thanks for joining me. And let's start with the basics, right? Because diabetes is a complex condition. What exactly is diabetes?
I'm so glad that you started by saying it's a complex condition, because it really is. And I think sometimes people tend to oversimplify what it's all about. So diabetes means that our blood glucose is elevated. There are different types of diabetes, so there are different reasons why this happens. But people living with diabetes need to work to get our blood glucose levels in range. And you're right when you say it affects huge numbers of people in Australia and around the world. And it's a really serious and really complex health condition. So thank you for having me on the show today so we can talk about it.
All right, so let's talk about the specifics. There are 3 types. So can you go through them?
Sure, there are 3 main types. There are lots of others, but we're going to focus on the main types. So there's type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune condition where the body produces no insulin. So if you have type 1 diabetes, you need to give yourself insulin. Then we have type 2 diabetes. And in type 2 diabetes, the body is still producing insulin. It's just the body's just not able to utilize it properly. So there are a whole list of reasons why that happens. And then the other one in terms of the most of those most common 3 is gestational diabetes. And that happens to women while they're pregnant. It usually goes away at the end of the pregnancy, but women who have gestational diabetes during their pregnancy have about a 50% chance of developing type 2 diabetes later on in life.
Okay. All right. So if diabetes is left untreated, right, what are the outcomes?
Yeah, look, diabetes needs prompt diagnosis and prompt treatment. That's really important because if it's not treated, apart from just like in the moment right now, people can feel really unwell, there are long-term complications that can occur that are incredibly serious. So they include things like diabetes-related blindness, lower limb amputation, kidney disease, increased risk of cardiovascular disease. All of these things are a risk if diabetes is not being treated.
How do you know if you've got diabetes? What are the symptoms?
Yeah. Well, this is such an important question because let's talk about type 1 diabetes. We have the 4 T's of type 1 diabetes. So Diabetes Australia, where I work, we ran a campaign about this actually for the last 3 years over National Diabetes Week to raise awareness of these 4 T's. So they are tired, thirsty, toilet, thinner. So people will say that they have these symptoms of an unquenchable thirst, needing to pee all the time, and they often think, well, I'm just drinking a lot, so that's why. Losing weight and not planning to, not trying to lose weight, and also being tired, absolutely exhausted. Now, with type 2 diabetes, often there are no symptoms at all, and so it's people are living with silent, undiagnosed type 2 diabetes, and it's only picked up if they have a routine blood glucose check done by their GP. And with gestational diabetes, it's usually picked up when people have when women have a glucose tolerance check done during their pregnancy.
Can you also talk about how do you get it? I mean, is it genetic? Is it something that's lifestyle related, for example?
There are so many different factors. So again, we sort of need to speak about the different diabetes. There is an umbrella term diabetes, but in a lot of ways they're quite different. So I mentioned that with type 1, it's an autoimmune condition. There are two aspects to that for why somebody would get it. They do need to have a genetic predisposition, but then there's got to be a trigger as well. And that's where it's a bit confusing because we don't actually know what that trigger is. So there's a lot of work being done to try and identify what that is and then to see how perhaps we can stop that from happening. Type 2 diabetes is a bit different. Again, genetics plays a huge, huge part in it. So if you have a family member with type 2 diabetes, you're at an increased risk already of developing it. There are certainly, so we have modifiable and non-modifiable risk factors. So the modifiable ones are where we hear about people, where we're suggesting that people perhaps are a bit more active, that they lose a bit of weight. But they're all the things that people can do, but there are a lot of things that people can't do that also contribute to type 2 diabetes. So as I said, family history, it depends where you and your family are from in the world. There are some places where people have an increased risk. So there are a lot of non-modifiable things that we can do there too. And with gestational diabetes, it's similar to type 2 diabetes, but you have to be pregnant first.
Okay, be a problem for me. How much of an issue is diabetes? Because it is the fastest growing chronic condition here in Australia. Why do you think that is?
It is a huge issue. And look, I think that there are a number of reasons behind that. Look, part of it is that we have a very different life these days than we would have had, say, 15, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago. We're far more sedentary. We're not moving around as much. We don't necessarily encourage people to be active. We build communities where there is absolutely no access for people to walk places or to get on public transport. They're reliant on their cars. So all of those sorts of things are certainly adding to the increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And we know, though, as well, type 1 diabetes is increasing as well, but we're not really exactly sure why that is. So there are lots of ideas about why it may be, but there's no real, there's not a consensus that we can point at and say that's what it is. So let's start doing that to fix this situation.
Okay, now let's talk about how you can live or manage the condition, right? And you're more than qualified to talk about this because you've lived with type 1 diabetes since 1998. So to what extent is it manageable?
Yeah, that's right. So I've had type 1 now for 22 years. Is it manageable? Yes, it is manageable because here I am having a chat with you, but oh my goodness, it is hard. It's hard and it's complex and it doesn't go away. There is no risk, there's no opportunity to take a holiday from diabetes. It's constant. For somebody living with type 1 diabetes, the day-to-day living with it involves needing to really balance the insulin that I take with the food that I'm eating, with the activity that I'm doing, with the stress that I'm feeling, with the hormones that I'm experiencing. There are so many different factors that impact on that blood glucose level that I was speaking about early on that we're trying to keep into a really tight range. And people with type 2 diabetes have just as many different challenges as well. A lot of people are on insulin. Some people are not. They might be on oral medications, or they might be modifying their diet, doing a bit more exercise, which is often what is suggested for people when they're newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. But it's a constant day in, day out challenge that we are living with. So I think that, we often tend to oversimplify diabetes and think that it's just, really simple maths equations that work. Unfortunately, that's not the case, though. It really is quite difficult.
But do you lead a relatively normal life?
I think I do. I lead a very, well, nobody's leading a normal life.
What's normal?
I know. When it's not, the times of COVID, my life, I have a wonderful job at Diabetes Australia where I'm very, very fortunate to travel around the world and speak at conferences and be part of really interesting international projects. I've got a wonderful family. I've got a 15-year-old daughter. So I had my daughter, I was diagnosed with diabetes at that time. The way that I describe it is that I have a life like everybody else, but diabetes adds a significant degree of difficulty to it. And we're highlighting this week as part of National Diabetes Week, that people with diabetes make an estimated 180 extra decisions every single day. And somebody did the calculations, and I kind of wish I hadn't seen this because it's 65,000 extra decisions every year. I would so much prefer to be binging on a Netflix series for that time rather than thinking about diabetes.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I do want to play one of those videos. It's a 30-second video from Diabetes Australia. Here it is.
Thanks.
I think it's a great video and goes back to what you were talking about just a few seconds ago. So what do you think is the key message to come out of that educational video there?
I think there are a couple of things. I think it highlights just how present diabetes is all the time. It's almost like this white noise or soundtrack, if you like, that accompanies everyday life. But also it goes a long way to showing that diabetes isn't just about those physical treatment aspects that people think about. Oh, you have diabetes, you give yourself insulin, you watch what you eat. All of those sorts of things certainly are part of it. But the mental health challenges are just as real. And in fact, I guess if you think about the fact that we're making all those diabetes decisions and the relentlessness of it, you can understand why people do get burnt out and feel quite, distressed about their diabetes at times.
Right. And just finally, maybe to leave it on a positive note, what's your final message to those living with diabetes?
Oh, look, I keep saying this, that I really wish that we were kinder to ourselves. Diabetes is a really, really tough gig. It really is. It's hard work. And I think sometimes we're just so hard on ourselves when we're not seeing the numbers that we want, when we're feeling a little bit unmotivated, when we're feeling stressed about everything. And I think that a bit of kindness goes a long way towards, essentially what is a difficult condition and a really stigmatized condition as well. So, be kind to yourself. It's hard.
Renza, I really appreciate your time on Your Health and Your Wealth. The website address for some educational pieces and some advice and where to get help is on the screen. It's headsupdiabetes.com.au. Renza, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us today. Bye-bye.
Okay, there's Renza Scibilia there. You can follow her on Twitter at Renza S, RENZAS, and Diabetes Australia at Diabetes Oz. So that's Diabetes AUS. Okay, so from your health, let's move on to your wealth. And 33,000 borrowers switched home loans in May. That's a record $15 billion worth. So is it right for you? To talk us through that is property expert Philip Sangster. Philip, thanks for your time. Phil, what exactly does it mean to refinance?
Well, refinance is for someone who has a home loan and looking to what their other options, what other lenders have, looking to refinance away from perhaps from their current lender to another lender. That's what refinance actually means.
Who would typically do it?
Look, it's something that you should be talking, if you've got a home loan, and a lot of Australians, most of us probably do, you need to be talking to your lender or to your finance specialist on a regular basis. And if you're doing that once a year, and that's what I think is always a good time to do it, is then you're just looking over what your current home loan is and seeing if it's still the right one for you.
Now, Phil, this graph on the screen right now, it's from the Commonwealth Bank, but it's based on ABS data, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and it shows that refinancing has surged quite dramatically over the past couple of months. May in particular, owner-occupier refinancing up to about $10 billion. As you can see, it's a record. Investor loans also so strong. Phil, why do you think there is so much strong interest in doing it right now?
Well, the federal government, as part of their stimulus packages, one of them was to put money into the banking system. I think it was about $157 billion, which is a huge number. And that's for both commercial customers as well as residential. And they said to the banks, go out and lend. So we were waiting with anticipation to see what the banks were actually going to do. And what they've done quite innovatively is come out with a fixed rate product for owner occupiers only, and it must be principal interest repayments. But as part of it is subsidised by the government, then we've got rates as low as 2.09, 2.19, 1.99% for 2 or 3 year fixed, only for owner occupiers and only at principal and interest. So that's why the spike is at the moment. It's why it's in owner occupied lending, and it's why it's fixed as well.
Can we talk about whether or not, though, it is right for everyone, refinancing, and what are the costs involved?
Very good point, because taking a fixed rate is not for everybody. I think the statistics leading up over past the last 10 years shows that about between 12 and 20% of people at any given time take out a fixed rate. So it's something that you really need to work through and find out if that is right for you. But at the moment, interest rates have been on variable in the threes, and we all thought that was a really great rate. But 2.09 or 2.19 is a pretty fantastic rate.
Because there can be switching fees as well, so you need to take that into consideration.
When you refinance, so going away from one lender to another, there are going to be some costs. Your current lender is going to charge you an exit fee of some sort. They disguise that under all sorts of names. And then, of course, there's the discharge of the mortgage at the land titles office with your current lender, and then the remortgaging at the land titles with your current with the new lender as well. So yeah, typically around about $1,000 is what I always say is going to cost you to switch lenders. But of course, if you've currently got a fixed rate, there could be break cost fees, and that could be quite high. So it's really important that you know all the numbers before you actually do it.
So Phil, if someone's exploring their refinancing options, what are the initial steps they should take?
You've got to talk to someone. You've got to talk to a finance specialist. You've got to talk to your current mortgage broker. You've got to talk to your lender. You need to talk to someone who can give you and walk you through and work out what's right for you. Don't do it alone, because there are traps, and the cost can be expensive if you make the wrong decision. You've got to work out what's right for you.
And Phil, what about eligibility? Even during COVID-19 times, it's interesting that it spiked so much at what may or may not be the peak of COVID-19. Is it harder now? Well,
it's not a coincidence that it happened during COVID-19, because it is as a result of the stimulus package that the government's pumping into the banking system. But look, that's a very fair question. So lenders have always been, and they're becoming more so since the Royal Commission, of asking lots of questions about lenders to work out if the home loan that you're looking to take out, are you borrowing the right amount? What's your current income? Do you have the ability to repay the loan in the future? That's really the phrase that they all use. So they're looking at people to see if they've currently got a job. So yes, it can be tougher at the moment if, for example, you're one of the unfortunate ones that may have been laid off.
Phil, just finally, can we talk about the importance of having a solid credit rating? To what extent does that come into play when it comes to refinancing?
Oh, well, it's everything. I always say it's overarching everything. And your credit rating is something that you only have one in your life. And I always say you've got to look after it like a precious jewel, because yes, you need to preserve your credit rating. But here's the other added kicker, is that lenders also want to have a look at your most recent credit card statement, and they also want to see 1 month of where your salary goes into. So they're looking to see what you're spending on. So some of these, I know you're talking about Afterpay and some of the others in a previous podcast, but this is where people can get caught, because they're looking to see that you've actually spent perhaps something on Afterpay. The question always is, well, if you've got $20,000 saved in the bank, hey, great for you, but then why are you buying something for $500 on Afterpay? Yes, the banks do ask lots of questions. In turn, people like me ask lots of questions of everybody too.
And I ask lots of questions as well as a journo. Phil, thank you very much for your time and all that information on refinancing. Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. Thanks, Ricardo.
Phil Sangster there. And that is it for this stream. Don't forget that the information in this program is general in nature, so you should contact a licensed financial professional to make sure any investment decision that you make is right for you. Your Health and Your Wealth is available on all my social media platforms: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter. It's live, as you can see if you're watching now, or on demand at any time, and it'll be posted later as a podcast on Spotify. I'm Ricardo Gonçalves. Don't forget to tell your friends, and I will see you next time.